I'm standing in a coffee shop on Maple Street in Portland, Oregon, holding my phone with shaking hands, and I'm reading an email that just destroyed my entire world. Hey, my name is Emily, and before we dive in, I want to ask, where are you watching from today? Drop your country and city in the comments below. I read every single one. The email is from my business partner of 7 years, a man named Marcus Chen, and it's short, brutally short. It says, Emily, effective immediately, I'm dissolving our partnership. I've transferred all client files to my new company. You'll be hearing from my lawyer. Don't bother coming to the office. I read it 4 times. 4 times, standing there with my latte getting cold, because my brain literally couldn't process what I was looking at. This wasn't supposed to happen. We were supposed to be partners forever. We'd built everything together. But here's the thing about that email that made my heart actually stop. It was sent at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, which means Marcus had made this decision, prepared this move, set up his new company, and stolen every single one of our clients before I'd even finished my breakfast. And I had no idea it was coming. Let me back up. My name is Emily, and I'm 34 years old. 7 years ago, I was working as a senior marketing strategist at a mid-size agency in Portland, burned out, exhausted, taking Ambien just to sleep at night. I was good at my job, really good, but I was tired of working for someone else's vision. That's when I met Marcus. He walked into our office one morning for a client meeting, and honestly, he was the kind of guy you notice. Tall, charismatic, always had this calm confidence about him. He wore expensive watches, drove a Tesla, and somehow made everyone in a room feel like he was listening to them, really listening. He was a software developer by trade, but he'd gotten into business consulting, and he was phenomenal at it. After that meeting, he asked me out for coffee. And I should tell you, I'm not one of those people who falls hard and fast. I'm cautious. I think things through. But Marcus had this way of making you feel like you were the most important person in his world, and I got caught up in it. We dated for about 8 months, and then one night he said something that changed everything. We were at dinner, this nice Italian place in the Pearl District, and he looked at me across the table and said, Emily, I think we're wasting our potential working for other people. What if we started something together? What if we combined what I do with code and systems and what you do with strategy and client relationships, and we actually built something that was ours? I remember the exact feeling. It was like someone had offered me permission to dream out loud. So I quit my job. Marcus left his consulting gig. We took out a small business loan, rented a modest office space downtown, and we launched Clarity Marketing and Development in January 2017. And I want to be really honest here. Those first 3 years were some of the best years of my life. We worked insane hours, but we were working for ourselves. We built an incredible team. We had this office culture that felt like a family. Our clients loved us. We went from barely breaking even in year 1 to making real serious money by year 3. By year 5, we had 15 employees, and we were the fastest growing marketing and development firm in the Portland metro area. Marcus handled all the tech and system side. I handled client relationships, strategy, and team leadership. We balanced each other perfectly, or at least I thought we did. The first sign that something was wrong came about 6 months before that devastating email. I was in a client meeting with our biggest account, a company called Meridian Health Solutions, and I was pitching them on a new product launch strategy. Meridian had been with us for 3 years, and they were our highest paying client. They generated about $45,000 a month in revenue. I was mid-presentation, talking about their Q2 timeline, when the CEO of Meridian, a woman named Patricia, looked confused. Wait, she said, didn't Marcus already present something like this to us last week? I froze. What do you mean last week? I asked. Yeah, he came in solo, showed us a completely different direction for the launch. Honestly, Emily, it's a way better approach. We were going to sign off on it this week. I could feel my face getting hot. I wasn't angry yet. I was confused. Why would Marcus pitch Meridian directly without looping me in? I managed all of our high-level client relationships. That was literally my job. I smiled, took it professionally, said something like, oh, Marcus is always thinking ahead. Let me just sync with him on the direction, and I'll get back to you with the full coordinated plan. But inside, something felt off. When I got back to the office, I found Marcus at his desk and asked him about it straight up. Why did you pitch Meridian without me? He looked up from his screen and he had this expression that I now realize was annoyance at being questioned. I had an idea. I thought it was good. I ran it by them. No big deal. Marcus, they're my client. I manage the relationship. You don't just go pitch them independently. Emily, they're our client, not your client. I'm part of the company too. I can talk to clients about strategy. And here's the thing. He was technically right. He could talk to clients, but we'd always operated with clear lanes. He didn't manage relationships. I did. And now he was doing it secretly without me. I let it go. I told myself it was a one-time thing. People get excited about ideas. I didn't want to be that person who got territorial over clients. I was being nice. I was being professional. I was being, in retrospect, stupid. 3 months later, I started noticing things disappearing. I was running a financial report one morning, just checking in on our quarterly numbers, and I noticed that our project pipeline looked different than it had the week before. We had 3 major projects that I could have sworn were solid, scheduled for Q3. Now they were gone. I asked Marcus where they'd gone. Moved some things around, he said, without looking at me. Where? Still figuring it out. That was a non-answer, and I knew it. But I was distracted. We were in the middle of hiring, and I was focused on bringing on a new senior strategist. I let it slide. Then I got a text message from one of our longest-standing team members, a guy named David, who'd been with us since year 2. David texted, "Hey, can we grab coffee? Need to talk about some stuff that's happening here." We met at a coffee shop near the office, and David looked nervous, genuinely nervous. "Look," he said, "I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but Marcus has been having separate meetings with me and a few others on the dev team. He's asking us about our compensation, our benefits, what we like about working here, what we'd want to change." I felt something drop in my stomach. "What kind of tone does he use?" I asked. "Like, he's recruiting us. He keeps saying stuff like, imagine if we had a company that was just development focused, without all the bloat of the strategy side. We could move so much faster." That's a direct quote, Emily. He said, "without all the bloat of the strategy side." David looked genuinely uncomfortable. "I'm telling you because you've been good to me. You've always treated us fairly. But I think Marcus is planning something." I thanked David, and we finished our coffee in silence. On the drive back to the office, my hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I wasn't angry yet. I was scared, real, deep in your bones scared, because I suddenly understood what was happening. Marcus wasn't having a random phase of poor decision-making. He was methodically, deliberately preparing to take our company out from under me. And I had no idea how far along he was. That night, I did something that I'm not proud of, but I did it anyway. I logged into our company Slack account using an admin override, and I checked Marcus's private messages. I know that's a violation. I know that. But I needed to understand what I was actually dealing with, and I was running out of time. What I found made me feel physically sick. Marcus had been having direct conversations with at least 8 of our team members. He was offering them positions in a new company he was starting called Chen Development Group. He was offering them 10% raises and equity stakes. He was being very careful not to be explicit about trying to poach them, but the intent was crystal clear. But here's the thing that actually made my breath catch. In his messages with David and one other developer named Sophie, he was also discussing clients, specifically which clients should go to the new company and which ones would stay with what he was basically referring to as the old place. He was literally dividing up our clients like they were assets to be split. And then I found an email chain between Marcus and someone with an address I didn't recognize, an address at a domain called claritydev.com. That was our domain, or I thought it was our domain. But apparently Marcus had already registered claritydev.com as a separate entity. He had filed the LLC papers. He had everything set up. All he was waiting for was the execution date. I sat at my kitchen table at midnight reading these messages, and I felt something break inside me. Not dramatically, just a quiet breaking, like a piece of glass that finally gives way after being under pressure too long. 7 years of work, 15 employees who depended on me, dozens of clients who trusted us, and Marcus was going to take it all. But worse than the material loss, worse than the money or the office or even the clients, was the betrayal of it. The coldness, the calculation, the fact that he'd been sitting across from me in meetings, going to team lunches with me, texting me about project deadlines, all while building an entire exit strategy designed to destroy me. I didn't sleep that night. By the way, and hey, if you haven't already, tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from right now? I love seeing where Emily's stories reach around the world. The next morning, I called my lawyer. Her name is Rachel, and she's brilliant, sharp, no nonsense, the kind of lawyer who makes corporate people nervous. "How are you funded?" Rachel asked after I'd told her everything. "What do you mean?" "The company, the original loan. How was it structured?" "It was a small business loan that I took out. Marcus didn't put up capital. He came in with sweat equity, his technical expertise, but the initial debt was all me." Rachel's eyes lit up. "Okay," she said, "that's actually good. That's actually really good, because that means you have a claim on company assets. If he's trying to liquidate or transfer client contracts without your approval, that's potentially breach of fiduciary duty, depending on how your partnership agreement is structured. Let me review your documents." I went home and found our original partnership agreement. We'd had it drafted by a local business attorney back when we started, and I hadn't looked at it in probably 5 years. I read through it, and my heart started pounding. Section 4.7 stated that any dissolution of the partnership required unanimous consent from all partners. That meant Marcus couldn't legally dissolve the company or transfer assets without my agreement. Section 6.2 stated that intellectual property, client contracts, and proprietary systems created during the partnership belonged to the partnership, not to individual partners. Section 8.1 stated that any attempt to fraudulently transfer assets would result in liquidated damages of 25% of the company valuation, plus legal fees. In other words, if Marcus tried to steal our clients and our company, he was violating our legal agreement multiple times over. But here was my problem. Knowing he was violating our agreement and actually proving it were two different things. And Marcus wasn't stupid. He wasn't going to leave a paper trail, except he already had. I spent the next 48 hours documenting everything. The email chain about the new LLC, the Slack messages, the financial records showing which clients had disappeared from our pipeline, the meeting notes about projects that had suddenly vanished, every piece of evidence that showed Marcus's deliberate, systematic plan to steal our company. And then I did something that was either genius or completely insane. I'm still not entirely sure which. I called Marcus's wife. Her name was Veronica, and I'd met her a handful of times at company events. She was a therapist, actually. Worked at a practice in Southwest Portland. She seemed nice enough, though I didn't know her well. Marcus was always a little guarded about his personal life, even with me. I looked up her office number and called. The receptionist was skeptical about connecting me, but I said it was urgent, and a few minutes later, Veronica picked up. "This is Emily," I said, "from Marcus's company. I need to meet with you, in person, today, if possible, and please don't tell Marcus that I called." There was a long pause. "I'm about to do something that's going to affect your entire life," I continued, "and I think you have a right to know what's happening before it happens, but I need you to trust me enough to meet for coffee." Veronica agreed to meet me at 4 p.m. at a coffee shop near her office. I'm not going to lie, I was terrified the whole drive over. What was I even going to say? That her husband was a fraud? That he was stealing from his business partner? Would she believe me? Would she tell Marcus immediately and blow up my entire plan? I didn't even know if I had a plan at this point. I just knew I had evidence, and I knew that Veronica deserved to understand what kind of man she was married to. When Veronica walked in, I was struck immediately by how tired she looked, like she hadn't been sleeping well, like something was already bothering her. She sat down across from me, and I just laid it all out. I showed her the evidence, the Slack messages, the email chain about the new company, the financial records, the client pipeline that was disappearing. I explained how Marcus was planning to take our clients, steal our company, and reconstruct it as his own thing, all without my knowledge or consent. I watched her face as she read through everything on my phone, and then she said something that completely surprised me. "Yeah, I know." I blinked. "What?" "I know he's planning something. I've known for a while. I just didn't know exactly what." Veronica handed my phone back to me, and her voice was very steady. Emily, we've been married for 9 years, and in the last year, I've watched my husband become someone I don't recognize. He's paranoid, defensive. He won't talk to me about anything. He's been on his phone constantly, taking calls in the garage. He's been withdrawn. We haven't had a genuine conversation in months. She took a sip of her coffee, and her hands were shaking slightly. I became a therapist because I believe in people. I believe in understanding people and helping them heal. But Marcus, I don't think he wants to be understood. I think he wants to be admired or feared. And when he's not getting that from the people around him, he gets resentful. Veronica looked at me directly. Why are you telling me this? Because, I said slowly, I think you're in a position to help me stop him, and I think you might want to. Here's what I understood, sitting in that coffee shop with Veronica. Marcus's biggest vulnerability wasn't legal, it was personal. Veronica told me that they had a prenuptial agreement, which made sense since Marcus had been fairly wealthy when they married. But she also told me that Marcus was paranoid about infidelity, about being cheated on, about being betrayed. He actually requested a clause in our prenup, Veronica said quietly, where if he could prove I was unfaithful, he'd be entitled to significantly more assets. It was a weird thing to push for, but I agreed because I knew I wasn't unfaithful, and I thought it was just anxiety on his part. Has he ever suspected you of anything? I asked. All the time. He checks my phone. He asks me where I'm going. He's incredibly controlling about my schedule. It's been getting worse. I thought for a moment. Then I asked her the question that would change everything. Do you have access to his devices, his phone, his laptop, anything like that? Veronica hesitated. He leaves his laptop at home. He works from the office mostly, but sometimes he'll bring it home and leave it in the office at home. Why? Because, I said, everything he's planning is documented. Every conversation, every email, every message about what he's doing. If we could access that laptop and pull the files before he executes his plan, we'd have everything we need to stop him legally. We'd have proof of breach of contract, fraud, theft of trade secrets, all of it. Veronica stared at me. You're asking me to spy on my husband. No, I said. I'm asking you to protect yourself, because if Marcus can do this to me after 7 years of partnership, what do you think he's going to do to you when he doesn't need you anymore? Men like this, they use people, and when they're done using them, they discard them. Veronica was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, I need to think about this. I gave her my number and we parted ways. I genuinely thought I'd overplayed my hand. I thought Veronica would go home and warn Marcus, and everything would fall apart. But she didn't. 3 days later, Veronica called me back. I'm in, she said, but we have to be smart about this, and you have to promise me something. You have to promise me that you're not using me as a tool to hurt Marcus just for revenge. You have to promise me you're doing this because it's actually the right thing to do. I promise, I said. And I meant it. I wasn't interested in revenge. I was interested in survival. That weekend, when Marcus was out at the gym, Veronica took his laptop from his home office and brought it to me. My hands were literally shaking as I opened it. The file organization was meticulous. Marcus was the kind of person who kept detailed records of everything. He had a folder labeled New Company that contained the LLC filing documents for Chen Development Group, a spreadsheet listing all of our clients with projected revenue and margin calculations for his new company email drafts to 14 clients, pre-written and ready to send, explaining that he was taking his work in a different direction, and that they could either follow him to Chen Development or stay with his former partner Contract Templates for his new company. A document titled Employee Recruitment Plan with salary offers pre-drafted for 8 of our team members, a detailed timeline marked execution date June 15th, 2024. But there was something else. In a subfolder labeled Personal, there were hundreds of photos of Veronica. They had been taken without her knowledge. Photos of her at her office, her at coffee shops, her with friends, her at the gym. There was a spreadsheet documenting every place she went, every person she met with timestamps and location data. Veronica had been right. Marcus wasn't just planning to destroy his business partner. He was building a case to prove his wife was unfaithful so he could keep more of their marital assets in a divorce. I felt something very cold settle in my chest. I called my lawyer, Rachel, and I told her what I'd found. This is better than anything I could have hoped for, Rachel said carefully.
Emily, this is not just evidence of breach of contract. This is evidence of a coordinated fraud scheme, multiple counts. And those photos, if Veronica is willing to testify that those were taken without her consent, we might have stalking charges, invasion of privacy, harassment. The list goes on. I spent the next week with Rachel, and we built a legal strategy.
We filed an emergency restraining order to prevent Marcus from transferring any company assets. We filed a claim against Marcus for breach of fiduciary duty, theft of trade secrets, and fraudulent transfer of partnership assets. We attached copies of the evidence from his laptop. And here's the beautiful part, because we filed first, because we had irrefutable documentation of his plan, the judge sided with us immediately. On June 14th, 2024, one day before Marcus's planned execution date, he received notice that his personal assets were being frozen pending the litigation, that Chen Development Group's formation was being invalidated, and that any attempt to contact our clients to solicit their business would constitute breach of the restraining order. In other words, his entire plan was destroyed in one day. But that was just the beginning. Here's where the story gets complicated. Marcus didn't go quietly. He hired a very expensive lawyer and tried to claim that he had a right to start a competing business, that I was being vindictive, that the restraining order was overreach. But the evidence was airtight. The judge wasn't sympathetic. And then Veronica made her move. With her own lawyer, she filed for divorce, and she disclosed the surveillance. She disclosed the photos. She disclosed the documents he'd been building to prove infidelity. And she claimed emotional abuse and invasion of privacy. Now, I want to be really careful here because I don't want to villainize Veronica for taking action to protect herself. She wasn't a villain. She was a woman who realized that the person she'd married had become someone dangerous, and she made a choice to get away from him. The irony, of course, was devastating for Marcus. He'd been building a case to prove Veronica was unfaithful so he could keep more money in the divorce. Instead, the surveillance and obsession he'd documented became evidence of emotional abuse, and the judge basically said, "This man is not trustworthy, and his wife deserves the vast majority of their marital assets for psychological harm." Marcus ended up losing his house, most of his savings, and custody of their daughter was split but leaning heavily toward Veronica. He also faced a civil lawsuit from me that settled for $680,000, which covered the damage to my business, my attorney fees, and damages for fraudulent misrepresentation. Our company survived. More than survived, actually. The whole situation brought Clarity Marketing and Development into the local news cycle, but the narrative was interesting. It became a story about a woman fighting back against business fraud, and our clients stood by us. Some were actually disgusted by what Marcus had tried to do, and it actually strengthened their loyalty. I restructured the company. I brought in a new business partner, a woman named Julie, who I'd known for years and genuinely trusted. The business grew 40% in the year after the lawsuit settled. I used some of the settlement money to give every employee who Marcus had tried to recruit a 15% raise because they'd stayed loyal even when offered better compensation elsewhere. That meant a lot to me. David, who'd warned me about what was happening, became my director of operations. The team rebuilt stronger, better, more carefully. And Marcus? I'm not going to pretend I don't know what happened to him because I do. People still tell me things about him, and honestly, I prefer not to follow his story too closely. Last I heard, he was working as a freelance developer somewhere in Seattle, making decent money, but no longer the kind of person who gets noticed when he walks into a room. Veronica actually became a bit of a friend to me, surprisingly. We got coffee once a month for almost 2 years. She went back to school to get certification in trauma therapy and opened a practice specifically focused on helping people recover from financial and emotional abuse. We lost touch eventually. People do, but I always wished her well. Here's what I've learned from all of this, and I think it matters. The impulse I had in the moment when I found out what Marcus was doing was to feel like a victim. And in some ways, I was. Someone I trusted had betrayed me. That was real. That was legitimate. But victimhood is a passive state, and I didn't stay there. I moved into agency. I looked at the facts. I built a strategy. I took action. The other thing I learned is that the person you're looking at might not be the person you think you're looking at. Not because you're foolish, but because some people are very good at being two different people. Yeah, the version they show you and the version they actually are. I don't regret being trusting with Marcus. I don't regret building a company with him. I don't regret the 7 years of work, even though it was complicated at the end. But I also don't regret fighting back. And I don't regret the fact that Veronica did too. There's something powerful about two people who've been lied to and manipulated saying, not anymore, not to us, not by you. Marcus tried to take everything from me. He tried to take everything from his wife. He tried to do it quietly, methodically, legally. But he miscalculated. He thought that because he was smart and careful, he could execute a perfect crime. What he didn't account for was that I had evidence, and I had nothing to lose by using it. And he didn't account for his wife reaching the end of her rope and deciding that her peace of mind was worth more than protecting his reputation. I'm Emily, and I survived it. Not just survived, thrived. My business is doing better now than it ever did when Marcus was there. My team is more loyal. My clients are more invested. I know myself better. I know what to look for in people. I know what red flags to pay attention to. And I know that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's just moving forward without them and building something better in their absence.